This is Brian Benoit, and welcome to the eSchool for the launch of the Insight 2000 Mini. I'm going to walk you through what the new product offering is and how to use it as a delta versus Keyence. So first, let's start with what the benefits for the IS-2000 Mini are. And mainly, as most of you have heard about, the Minis consisting of two major feature upgrades. So the first is autofocus using liquid lens technology, and the second is a compact form factor. So most of you are familiar with the DataMan 262. So basically, we're borrowing that model from the folks in ID and making that into a sensor. And so really what this does gives us a better solution for OEM machine builders. They've been asking for a smaller size and for autofocus for a while. So we think that this product fits the bill for that need. And it also neutralizes a couple of Keyence deltas that we've been hearing about from the field. First of all, the IV line has autofocus. And this is important for, especially in automotive, because folks are changing over the types of parts being read by the sensor. And so this autofocus really helps delivering a solution to that problem. And with the IVHG, using the remote head, it's used in some space-limited applications where close working distance is required and where the sensor itself needs to fit in a really tight space. And so the IS-2000 Mini helps quite a bit there as well. The next slide actually shows the dimensions for the IS-2000 Mini. First, compared to the Torch, so we actually save about 73% in terms of the volume when comparing the Mini to the current version of the IS-2000 with Torch, and also when you compare it with the IVHG head, we're still a little larger, but really it's important to note here that these are smart cameras with the embedded Insight technology, where the IVHG requires a separate controller. And so this is something you should emphasize when folks are comparing the Mini versus the IVHG. You don't need to find space for a separate controller when you're using the Mini, and that's really an important consideration when space is limited for many of these applications. So again, it's the big difference between the Torch and the Mini model that you want to emphasize here. And so with those two major new features, we think we're going to neutralize quite a bit of the deltas that Keyence has been pushing over this last year. So let's jump into the models that we'll be supporting with the Mini. This table should be quite familiar to everyone. We're still focused on the three main models of the Insight 2000, so the 110, 120, and 130, and for color with the 120 and the 130. So where the tool sets have not changed. So again, with the 110 monochrome version, you're only getting pattern, and you're also getting a 1x processing speed. So this is really reserved for very specific applications. For the 120 and 130, the tool sets are also the same. Either choose color or grayscale. And then with the 130 model, you get the extra pixel count, edge finding, and some of the measurement and counting tools. So if you're familiar with the current three models of the Insight 2000, it's virtually identical between that and the Mini. One of the important considerations, though, is you need to choose the proper lens for the Insight 2000 Mini, and we'll go into that in a second. So like the Insight 2000 Torch model, we'll also be supporting a number of different options in terms of what's supported on the Mini. And so we're sticking with the modular situation where when you buy your initial unit, you get with a specific colored light and a specific size lens. And if you need to switch this out in the field, you're perfectly, that's fully supported. And so the backside of the model is the same. So you get the same M12 power and I/O connector. The standard resolution continues to be 640 by 480, and that's could be selectable depending on which type of model you're using. And we also support the M12 Ethernet connection. Now the front is where things differ. So first of all, there's two different liquid lens autofocus options. Again, if you're familiar with Dataman, you're also familiar with the 6.2 millimeter short range lens and the 16 millimeter long range lens. We'll have specific guidance on what working range you can use for each one of these lenses. But I think the key point here, and something we want to emphasize, is that these are not field changeable. Unlike with Dataman, where you're able to switch out liquid lens autofocus options in the field, you won't be able to do that with the Insight 2000 Mini because these are calibrated in the factory. And where Dataman can get away with losing a bit of calibration for many of their tools, we actually can't, because the tools for vision require a tighter tolerance. And so we don't recommend that these lenses are switched out in the field. Basically, you'll purchase it as built, and you won't be able to switch those out. Now, the two things that will be field changeable are lighting options. And so with the monochrome Insight 2000 Mini, you'll default to a red light, and with the color versions, you'll default to a white light. But you'll also have the option for a blue light as well. And then you'll also be able to change out the diffusion covers. So just like on the Merlin side, you'll get clear lens as well as polarized. And in this case, because Dataman already has it, we'll have half polarized option for both 6.2 and for 16 millimeter long range. And so this will be well defined in the product portal when you're choosing accessories. But the overall, the strategy is the same. You'll be able to switch out these options based on your application. And here we'll go into a little bit more about the accessories. So like I mentioned before, you've got the 3 lights. You also have an option for a couple of different filters, bandpass filters, just like with the torch option. And so we have a red and a blue bandpass filter. For the covers, you can use clear, ESD, or polarized covers. And you'll have to choose the proper color based on which type of liquid lens you have, either the short range 6.2 millimeter or the long range 16 millimeter. And then we'll also have the standard mounting brackets. And again, these are very similar to what we already have with the torch. But we'll also have this option of a mirror bracket that is compatible with the Insight 2000 Mini. And then the HMI will support the VisionView 900 touchscreen, and then all of the standard power and I/O cables that you expect. And then finally, let's get into some of the product IDs here. So this is how you'll actually order these in the product portal. So the max resolution you're all very familiar with, just like with the 110, 120, 130 models on the standard Insight 2000, you'll be able to switch between, for the 130s, 800 by 600 or 640 by 480. The main thing to note here is that we're using these product IDs to differentiate between the lens sizes. So you'll notice S and L. So S signifies short, L signifies long, so the 16 millimeter lens. And then you'll be able to purchase both of those for color monochrome models as well as color models. And just like on the standard Insight 2000, we will not offer a 110 version color model. So again, if you lay them all out, we're actually really expanding the number of models you can order through the product portal with the Insight 2000 Mini, basically because we'll have to stock short range and long range liquid lens modules. And then finally, this product is enabled by the release of Insight Explorer version 5.5. So it's very important to note that Insight 2000 Minis will not be compatible with software pre 5.5. So that's something you'll have to keep in mind when you're going out and potentially helping folks out. So there's really 4 main new features that will be available with the Mini, but also with the Torch model. So on the 130, you'll have the option to use independent fixture locations. This is something folks have been asking for quite a while on the Insight 2000 line. And so with the 130, you'll have the option to fixture with different tools. You'll also have the ability to toggle on and off tool graphics for pixel count. And this is something that could save overhead, processing overhead if so required when you're doing visualizations of the tools. The next new feature in 5.5 is the ability to retrain a pattern tool via discrete input. This is enabled on all 3 models and will allow you to retrain your pattern via an external input within your job. Finally, this is to try to keep everything continuous with the rest of the Insight lines. We'll be supporting native mode output for RS-232. So here, there's just more communication options with these sensors and allow for serial port control during runtime. And so these features are all part of the 5.5 release, and they'll all be available on the Mini. And with that overview, I want to jump into the software and show you guys some of the new screens that are enabled with the Insight 2000 Mini. Okay, then let's move on to EasyBuilder. And here we'll show off 3 of the new tools that are enabled in 5.5. One of them is Mini specific, that's the autofocus, and 2 are across the lines. And so we'll talk about specifically which models each one of these tools support. So first, let's get into the autofocus. So the first thing we want to do is go to our setup image step. And as normal, you get your 3 tabs. You get your trigger tab, your lighting tab, and your image tab. These are all the same as everyone is used to with the Insight 2000. But now you've got a new tab that's called Focus. And here is where you're setting all of your focus, your autofocus parameters. So there are 2 buttons here, a slider and a toggle, and we'll talk through each one of those. So first, let's look at the autofocus region. So as you'd expect here, what you're doing with the autofocus region is just setting the area in your image that you want the autofocus to tune in on. So this is where you want to basically overlay it right to the part. And if you have a part with some depth, you want to focus it on the area of the part that you want to be the sharpest. So you draw the region, you click OK, and that's what the tool will use to actually do the autofocus. The autofocus button itself is here, but first let's use this slider to bring the image in and out of focus. So you get an idea how much you can actually move the liquid lens around when you're actually trying to focus it. In our case, we'll bring it down to 0 to get the image fuzzy. And in this particular example, we're using the short range 6.2 millimeter liquid lens, but if you have the longer range, you might even get it out of focus more. So, but this looks pretty good, nice and fuzzy. So let's click on the autofocus button. And within a few seconds, depending on the region that it's actually looking at, you'll get the result, in this case, a nice sharp image at 77.6. And so this is basically an arbitrary setting between 0 and 100%. And this is the setting that will be used when the job is loaded or when it calls for an autofocus. So when you're doing a demo, it's actually probably a good idea to bring it out of focus and back in focus a few times to show that you're getting within a few percentage points the same readout each time. And so this is a really nice feature, and I think will enable quite a few applications where you're doing lots of job changeovers, or you need to, it's really difficult to set the autofocus because it's or the manual focus because it's in a tight spot. So the next one here, we've got the autofocus on job load, and this is exactly as you would imagine. Do you want the camera or the sensor to perform an autofocus when a new job is loaded? So you just toggle that on and off depending on your application. Okay, before we move away from the setup image step, I want to draw your attention to a difference between the Mini and the standard Insight Torch models. So for the Mini models, the light intensity sliding bar is actually not supported, and so the light is always set to 100% current with the Mini models, and so this is actually not a setting that you can adjust. The problem here is that its output is 70, and it actually should say 100 to assure the user that you're getting a maximum current. So this will be fixed in the next version of software, but for now, if anyone asks about it, they can rest assured that they're getting the maximum amount of light output. You still have the ability to set the target image brightness and the exposure time, obviously, so you're still able to adjust your lighting as needed. Okay, next let's go to the next feature that we want to demo here, and that is the ability to retrain a pattern via discrete input. And so this is enabled on all Insight 2000 models, so from the 110 up to the 130. And so to do this, what you do is you just overlay a pattern as normal. So let's click that guy, and we will draw our pattern around our poker chip, around the Cognex logo as we normally do. Let's change our search box so it goes a little bit quicker, and click OK. So now once you drop the tool, you actually have a new drop-down box, dialog box here. That's called Train Input. And so it defaults to none. So when it's none, it's obviously not going to retrain based on an input. But if your job calls for a specific point to actually retrain the pattern, you're able to do that via this drop-down menu. So of course, in our standard Insight 2000, we have the one input. And so you can click on input 0 here. But if you have an I/O expansion module, you'll have a number of different inputs to choose from there. So once we choose that input, the next thing you have to keep in mind is when you go to your inputs and outputs and you're setting this up further, you have to make sure that any discrete input for retraining a pattern is defined as an event trigger. That's the default, but it's something that is important to keep in mind when you're doing this. If you want a little bit more background on this discrete retraining of the pattern, I would recommend going to the EasyBuilder help section. I've actually got this one called up. I just did a search for pattern, and here we've got a brand new help dialog box that describes exactly what you need to do when you're using this new feature. And here it calls out using the event trigger. So this is actually really helpful. And I think if you're doing a deployment or you're helping someone set up a job with this, it's a good idea to send them over to the EasyBuilder help menu. Okay, and then finally we've got the third new feature, and that is the ability to toggle the graphics on and off of a pixel count tool. So here, let's go to the inspect part. Something to keep in mind with this new feature is it's only available on the 120 and 130, so basically the higher end models for the Insight 2000. So to show this guy off, let's go and we'll drop a pixel count tool on the poker chip. So we'll just use our normal couple of poker chip stacks up here. Click OK. And you'll see as the default, it'll overlay the yellow graphics on what it's considering a pixel and what's not considering a pixel. And so that's the standard interface everyone is used to. But we've gotten some feedback where if you're actually running the job, this could take up some processing power for when you're actually displaying the image. So we decided to add the ability to toggle this on and off. So down here within your edit tool for this particular pixel count tool, you have this new choice that's called Show Details. And so the default is yellow, so it's showing these guys and basically turned on. But if you click it, you'll see that the small circle in the middle will turn white. And now when you're actually running the job, those pixels won't show up. So let's actually show that off. So let's go to our standard. We'll turn that back on. Let's come down and we'll run our job. And when we put the sensor online, you get the normal interface here where the graphics are shown on the pixel count tool. Okay, so that's what that's the interaction everyone is used to at this point. So let's go back offline. We'll go back to our inspect part, our pixel count tool, and now we'll toggle this off. So now you'll see that the little white circle, the little circle turns white. And now if we could go back down to our run job, we go online, and those graphics will disappear. Now, of course, it's still passing, right? So it's still counting those pixels. It's just not displaying them on the readout. And so that's if this is a very specific request that we've received from a number of customers who are using this, who don't necessarily want to take up the processing power to show those graphics, but also in some cases you don't want those graphics overlaid onto your image. Even for a past image, you still want to see what the camera is seeing, and so this allows you the ability to actually toggle that off when you're in runtime. Okay, so that's an overview of the new tools for the Insight 2000 in version 5.5. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out, and we'll answer them as best we can. Okay, thanks. See you all soon. Bye.